The story starts in a place called Kaga Village, where a man named Daigo is in charge. His wife, Nue, is expecting a baby, and he really wants it to be a boy who can take over his leadership role. He's pretty anxious while waiting for the baby to arrive. Before his wife goes into labor, the scene changes and we see what Daigo did earlier. He went to a temple known as the Hell of Hall and made a deal with some demons there. In the deal, Daigo promised to give up something valuable in exchange for making his village prosperous and keeping him in power. He did this because the people in Kaga Village were suffering from poverty and a deadly disease, and he wanted to help them out. Daigo was unsure about what the demons would ask for in return for their help, which made him anxious about his wife's childbirth. Even though a monk warned him not to go through with the pact, he ignored the warning and decided to harm the monk, because he thought the monk was interfering. When Daigo told the demons what he wanted, lightning suddenly struck him, and it left a curse mark on his forehead, shaped like an X. This mark showed that he had indeed made a deal with the demon, and it was the same mark that was on the monk he had harmed earlier. In the end, Daigo's worries turned out to be true. Shortly after his son was born, lightning struck the baby, shocking everyone present. When Daigo saw his baby, he was surprised because the baby had only a skull and was missing eyes, nose, ears, hands, and feet. However, Daigo was still happy and laughed because this condition meant that his deal with the demon had been accepted. Unexpectedly, Daigo told the midwife to get rid of his son, saying that the baby was no longer useful. Nue, the mother, didn't want her son to be thrown away and tried to stop him. But Daigo didn't care and told her that she would give birth to another child, who would become his successor. When the midwife was about to abandon the baby, she couldn't bear it because she saw the baby's face filled with a strong will to live. So instead, she gently placed the baby in a boat, hoping that someone else would find and care for him. However, as soon as the baby was sent away, the midwife was suddenly attacked and eaten by a monster that had been following her all along. Shortly after, an old blind man appeared, and he could sense the monster's presence. He promptly defeated and killed the monster. Following this incident, Kaga Village started to thrive because Daigo had sacrificed his son, who had lost 48 of his organs to the demons. Unfortunately, no one knew what happened to his son except for an old blind man named Biwamaru. 16 years later, we meet a man named Chukai, who travels around and likes to put fake body parts on dead bodies that lost them in wars. After a while, someone praised his work, but Yuki explained that he did it not just for fun, but to become a better person. In a different place, a young girl named Dororo is seen selling things. Before long, some bullies show up because they realized she sold their stuff without permission. Dororo quickly runs away when she realizes they'd caught on. Meanwhile, there's a young man helping a boy, but the boy tells his mother that the man's face looks like a doll. Meanwhile, Dororo, who was still running from the bullies, ran into a hungry dog by accident. When she tried to feed the dog, the bullies threatened her, saying they would harm the dog. Dororo didn't want the dog to suffer, so she gave up and offered to let the bullies hurt her instead. Nevertheless, Dororo bravely fought back against the bullies by throwing stones at them, which made them angry and hurt. They even tried to drown her in the river. At that moment, the young man with the doll-like face appeared on a bridge. Strangely, he couldn't see Dororo and the bullies, but sensed an evil presence near the river. When they looked toward the river, they saw a pile of mud that turned out to be the monster the young man had been monitoring. The young man quickly let go of his two fake hands, which held two swords, and he began to fight the monster. Their battle was intense, but in the end, the young man defeated the mud monster. After the fight, Dororo was amazed by the young man because he was blind and still managed to defeat the monster with just one sword hand. Suddenly, the mask the young man wore fell off, revealing that his face, which was previously skinless, had miraculously grown skin. This surprised Dororo. At the same time, in the Hell of Hall Temple, one of the demon statues was destroyed by lightning. It turned out that the young man was Hyakkimaru, who was sacrificed by his father, Daigo, several years ago. One of the demon statues that got destroyed showed that Hyakkimaru's lost body parts, which were given to the demons by Daigo, would return to Hyakkimaru by some magic. However, this caused the prosperity promised to Daigo by the demons to slowly fade away. The scene changes to Nue, who now has a son to take over Daigo's leadership. Meanwhile, Dororo was curious about the young man, who was actually Daigo's son. She wanted to understand him better, so she kept following Hyakkimaru and tried different ways to communicate with him. Unfortunately, because some of his senses were sacrificed to the demon, Hyakkimaru couldn't hear or see Dororo. Nevertheless, her presence around him was a real help. When Hyakkimaru was going to eat raw fish, Dororo quickly made a fire and cooked the fish. But she was surprised once more because Hyakkimaru ate the freshly cooked fish without feeling any heat. Even though he couldn't see or hear Dororo, he could sense her presence nearby, similar to Biwamaru, who could see the aura of living creatures' souls. In addition to seeing a creature's soul aura, Hyakkimaru could also tell the color of the soul. If he saw a red soul, he considered the creature an enemy because red souls came from hatred. But if he saw a white soul, he saw it as a good creature because white souls were innocent, just like Dororo. This is why Hyakkimaru allowed Dororo to stay close to him, because he didn't see her as a threat. The next day, she tried to explain that they both needed money to survive. Dororo had an idea and suggested that Hyakkimaru use his abilities to defeat a monster in a nearby village they were heading to. When they reached the village, Dororo confidently offered her services as a monster exorcist to the village leader. She praised Hyakkimaru's abilities in dealing with monsters. Initially, the village leader had doubts about them, but since there were no other options, they were eventually accepted and provided with food and a place to stay. During the night, while they were resting, the lights suddenly went out, and a monster with a large head appeared and approached them. Dororo was frightened and urged Hyakkimaru to attack the monster, but he didn't want to harm it and allowed it to leave. Shortly after, the village leader arrived, so Dororo had to lie and confess that they had taken care of the monster. The following day, Dororo and Hyakkimaru were invited to meet the female village leader, Bandai, who was the highest authority in the village. When they arrived there, Hyakkimaru seemed ready to harm her, but Dororo quickly stopped him. Because Hyakkimaru attempted to harm Bandai, the villagers locked them both up, which frustrated Dororo. She never expected him to hurt Bandai, because she thought Bandai was a friendly and kind person. Before long, Biwamaru showed up and mentioned that he had seen Hyakkimaru. This confused Dororo, so she asked Biwamaru how he could know about Hyakkimaru, considering he was blind. Biwamaru explained that they could perceive things around them, even if they couldn't see them fully, just by their colors. For instance, when Dororo, Biwamaru, and Hyakkimaru looked at things, they could only see them as white. But Biwamaru clarified that their senses were exceptionally sharp, even more so than regular humans. Soon after, an evil presence suddenly appeared, and Hyakkimaru, sensing it, rushed to confront it. Biwamaru quickly followed him. Surprisingly, the source of the presence was Bandai, and Biwamaru explained that Bandai had a dark red aura, which indicated a demonic nature. Afterward, he revealed that Bandai had transformed into her true form as a monster and started battling Hyakkimaru. Strangely, when the monster was in a difficult situation, the village leader protected it and allowed it to escape. This made Hyakkimaru immediately chase after the village leader. On the other hand, Dororo was upset about what the village leader had done. It turned out he had protected the monster to prevent it from eating the villagers. He also promised to provide food from travelers passing through the village. Meanwhile, the battle between Hyakkimaru and Bandai's monster continued in the forest until Hyakkimaru finally defeated it. At the same time, Dororo, Biwamaru, and the village leader caught up with Hyakkimaru in the forest. Shortly after that, a monster appeared. This was the same one that had visited them the previous night, alerting them with its bell. When Dororo approached the monster, she found some belongings from wanderers who had been killed by Bandai. The treasure was substantial, enough to support the village's residents. Following that incident, Dororo apologized to Hyakkimaru for getting upset earlier. Unfortunately, he couldn't hear her apology, but he started to acknowledge her presence. Hyakkimaru then touched her face and wrote his name on the ground. This reminded Biwamaru that Hyakkimaru was the baby boy who had been abandoned in a boat. Around the same time, lightning struck one of the statues in the Hall of Hell Temple once more, causing it to break. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru winced in pain, which left Biwamaru and Dororo puzzled. However, this happened because he had finally regained his sense of taste. The scene changes to a group of people causing a massacre in a village. Shortly after, a woman appeared, calling one of the men by name. Sadly, she was stabbed by one of the killers and died instantly. Surprisingly, one of the killers was Jukai, a person who had previously crafted prosthetic limbs for war-torn corpses. The woman who died was his wife. Her death left Juki deeply saddened and frustrated, leading him to jump off a cliff. However, this was all in his past. He was still part of the Shibandono group, the assassins at that time. Several years later, Jukai, who used to be a ruthless killer, had transformed into a helper for people who had lost their limbs. He continued making prosthetic body parts, a skill he learned from a ship that had once aided him. Consequently, he became highly regarded for his ability to help many people lead normal lives again. Juki had a student named Kaname, who often assisted him because Juki had helped Kaname before. One day, while Kaname was walking in the forest, he came across a boy whose arm had been cut off in a samurai attack. Kaname rushed the boy to Juki for treatment. However, after the treatment, the boy's mother revealed some unsettling facts about Juki that angered Kaname. Kaname learned that Juki had been responsible for the death of his father, one of Juki's previous victims. He initially wanted to seek revenge and kill Juki. But Juki explained that he had promised to heal the boy and asked Kaname not to kill him so he could fulfill that promise. After hearing this, Kaname forgave Juki and allowed him to heal the boy first. However, once the boy recovered, Kaname, who had initially sought revenge, couldn't find closure and chose to ease his anger by leaving Juki and the prosthetic limbs he had made. Juki felt very sad after Kaname left, and his motivation to help people waned. While pondering by the river, he came across a boat and was surprised to discover a baby boy without eyes, a nose, and other organs. Out of compassion, Juki brought the baby boy to his home for treatment. 6 years later, the baby boy had grown up, and Juki taught him various ways to survive. Despite being unable to see or hear, the boy possessed a mysterious power that not everyone had. Since the boy didn't have a name, Juki named him Hyakkimaru. As time passed, Hyakkimaru was trained in the art of swordsmanship and became a strong and skilled samurai, even capable of defeating larger monsters despite his blindness. Unfortunately, he had suffered a severe injury at one point. The good thing was that he couldn't feel the pain from the wound. During one battle against a monster, Juki noticed something unusual about Hyakkimaru's body when he saw his prosthetic leg coming loose. To his surprise, he saw a new leg growing on Hyakkimaru. This revelation made him realize that Hyakkimaru's body was being claimed by the demon. Eventually, Juki sent Hyakkimaru away to find his missing body parts. Before his departure, Juki gave him a necklace that he had discovered when Hyakkimaru was on a boat, hoping it would help him reunite with his parents. In the present, we see a male samurai ruthlessly killing his enemies on command from his leader. The scene shifts to Hyakkimaru and his companion relaxing by a bonfire. Accidentally, Hyakkimaru stepped on the fire and felt pain for the first time because his sense of touch had returned. As Hyakkimaru and Dororo continued their journey, heavy rain suddenly poured, and they sought shelter in a temple. Shortly after, a woman arrived and advised Hyakkimaru to take refuge. Dororo explained to the woman that Hyakkimaru was deaf. They'd engaged in conversation, and the woman revealed that her purpose in the temple was to plead with the gods to bring back her elder brother, who had disappeared 5 years ago. Shortly after, an injured old man appeared, seeking help. Dororo approached the old man, while Hyakkimaru, noticing a blood-red aura from his eyes, rushed after him. Dororo followed Hyakkimaru and was horrified when she saw several people brutally killed. Suddenly, another man appeared and attacked Hyakkimaru. Thankfully, Hyakkimaru managed to defend himself. The man explained that he did it because of his bloodthirsty sword, and a battle ensued between them. Their fight was intense, but eventually Hyakkimaru managed to push the man into an abyss, causing him to lose his sword. When Dororo tried to retrieve the sword from Hyakkimaru's prosthetic leg, it suddenly glowed and took control of her instead. Meanwhile, a woman was searching for Dororo and Hyakkimaru. Instead, she encountered the man who had been defeated by Hyakkimaru. Surprisingly, the man turned out to be her elder brother. As a result, the woman took her elder brother to her home. Meanwhile, Dororo, under the control of the cursed sword, tried to escape but couldn't break free. The sword's power was overwhelming, and she nearly harmed the villagers who tried to approach her. Eventually, the sword had full control over Dororo, and she was guided to the sword's master's house, awaiting their arrival. On the other hand, Hyakkimaru secretly followed Dororo. When she entered the village and started heading towards the sword owner's house, Hyakkimaru confronted her. Meanwhile, the sword's master, who was still at his younger sister's house, wanted to leave, but his younger sister tried to stop him. She urged him to forget about the sword and return to her, but the sword meant everything to him, so he disregarded her pleas. The scene revisits the incident involving the man and how he obtained the cursed sword. The sword appeared as per his leader's command, who ordered him to use it to kill their enemies. The leader believed that if the sword was bathed in the blood of the slain, it would become more powerful. The leader's words were proven true when the sword, after being used to harm several prisoners, became sharper and the rust on it disappeared. However, because the sword was too difficult to control, the man ended up killing everyone present, including his leader who had given him the sword. Despite his sister's pleas to abandon the sword, he refused. On the other hand, Dororo, still under the sword's control, engaged in a fight with Hyakkimaru, and she'd almost harmed him. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru managed to disarm her with a precise attack. However, the situation was far from over, because the man reappeared and reclaimed his sword, leading to another conflict. Despite facing initial pressure, Hyakkimaru eventually triumphed in the fight and defeated the man. He also managed to strip the cursed sword of its power, turning it back into a regular sword. Shortly after, the woman arrived and found her elder brother had passed away, leaving her in mourning. At the same time, Hyakkimaru's ears suddenly grew back after successfully breaking the cursed sword, enabling him to hear. Meanwhile, Daigo appeared very distressed because several demonic statues in the Hall of Hell Temple had once again been shattered. He was convinced that this was the doing of the son he had sacrificed in the past, so he began searching for the son he had abandoned years ago, who was none other than Hyakkimaru. The scene changed to Hyakkimaru, who could now hear but was overwhelmed by the sounds around him. This was because it was his first time hearing, so Dororo covered his ears with a cloth to lessen the disturbing noises. Before long, a bird monster appeared and attacked them. Hyakkimaru had difficulty battling the bird monster because its sounds bothered him greatly. Fortunately, when Hyakkimaru was in a tight spot, Biwamaru arrived and aided him in defeating the bird monster. As a result of the fight, Hyakkimaru sustained severe injuries and needed treatment. However, Dororo was disappointed in him, believing he had become weak after gaining the ability to hear. Biwamaru explained that this was normal, because Hyakkimaru was still adjusting to hearing for the first time. Shortly after, Hyakkimaru regained consciousness, appearing tormented by the sounds he now heard. Biwamaru tried to help him by explaining the sounds around him, but it didn't work as Hyakkimaru was still not accustomed to them. The following day, while Hyakkimaru, Dororo, and Biwamaru were still asleep, Hyakkimaru suddenly woke up upon hearing someone singing. He followed the sound and found a girl named Miyane in the river. Curious, Hyakkimaru tried to approach her, but due to his ongoing health issues, he ended up fainting in her arms. Concerned for him, Miyane brought Hyakkimaru to her house for treatment. She also welcomed Dororo and Biwamaru to stay in her home. They met some orphans living with Miyane, as they had no parents or relatives to care for them. One of the boys explained that Miyane had to sleep during the day because she worked as a maid for the Sakai clan during the night, and she needed to rest. Shortly after, Biwamaru bid farewell to explore the area. The story then shifts to Daigo, who wants to attack the village where the Sakai clan resides. However, one of his bodyguards mentioned that their food supplies were insufficient due to a drought in their village, which discouraged Daigo. Meanwhile, Nue had noticed that the promised prosperity from the demon was starting to fade, although they didn't understand the reason. Meanwhile, while checking on Hyakkimaru's condition, Miyane noticed that his fever wasn't subsiding. Therefore, she took the initiative to request medicine at the Sakai clan inn. On the other hand, Biwamaru, exploring the area, unexpectedly came across a peculiar hole with a burning eye inside. When Miyane acquired the medicine and was about to approach Hyakkimaru, she felt uneasy under his gaze. She was perplexed about how he could look at her, even though she knew he was blind. Dororo tried to explain that Hyakkimaru could only see in the form of a soul aura, but Miyane still couldn't grasp the concept. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru touched Miyane's mouth, indicating that he wanted to convey something. Dororo attempted to clarify Hyakkimaru's intention, and it turned out that he wanted to hear Miyane sing because he found her voice very comforting. Upon hearing this, Miyane sang with all her heart, which helped Hyakkimaru become calm and adapt to his sense of hearing. Shortly after, Biwamaru arrived and suggested that the place they were in could serve as a good refuge in case of another war. However, he mentioned that the area was inhabited by demonic creatures. Upon receiving this information, Hyakkimaru hurried towards that location, despite not having fully recovered. Meanwhile, Miyane wanted to assist them and decided to work in the enemy's territory to gather information about the upcoming war. Dororo, feeling sorry for Miyane, wanted to help and set out to find her. At the same time, Hyakkimaru and Biwamaru reached the peculiar hole. Before long, a monster emerged from the hole, sucking them both inside. Despite the monster's considerable size, they managed to defeat it through their cooperation. Unfortunately, Hyakkimaru's leg got injured when the monster bit him, but after defeating the monster, his leg miraculously returned. However, his voice also returned, and he screamed in pain because of his severed leg. Meanwhile, Dororo had found Miyone, but she was shocked to see Miyone being harassed by enemy troops. After the confrontation, Biwamaru took the injured Hyakkimaru home for treatment. On their way, they encountered Dororo, who was extremely surprised by Hyakkimaru's injured leg and the return of his voice. Back at home, Miyone was surprised to find Hyakkimaru injured, so she rushed to take care of him. However, while Miyone was tending to him, Dororo decided to leave because she was disappointed to discover that Miyone worked as a prostitute. While outside, Dororo was approached by one of the boys who expressed their desire to have a rice field someday. The children hoped that the fields would be filled with golden rice in the future. They knew that Miyone was working hard to be able to buy a field. Upon hearing this, Dororo's disappointment towards Miyone lessened a bit. Meanwhile, in another place, Daigo was seen having an argument with his youngest son Tohomaru. Tohomaru wanted to join the war alongside his father, even though he was too young according to Daigo's judgment. Hearing his father's refusal, Tohomaru attempted to convince his mother, but she also denied his request. Feeling let down by his parents, he eventually left with his companions Higo and Miu. Tohomaru felt that his mother didn't love him and believed she was hiding something. From a young age, he had never received attention from her because she was focused on the statue that had been struck by lightning. The scene then shifts to Hyakkimaru, who struggles to stand up and keeps falling. Fortunately, Miyone comes to his aid and begins singing to comfort him. Meanwhile, Biwamaru decides to set out on his travels again. Before he leaves, he advises Dororo not to let Hyakkimaru enter the hole. When Miyone prepares to go to work, Dororo encourages her, now considering her a remarkable woman. Dororo wishes for Miyone to achieve her dream of owning a rice field and harvesting plenty of rice, so that she no longer has to work as a prostitute. The following day, as Hyakkimaru's leg recovers, he resumes his training. Miyone, who plans to go to work, asks Dororo to watch over him to ensure he doesn't go fight the monsters in the previous hole. As Miyone leaves, unbeknownst to her, several soldiers begin to stalk her. At night, Dororo woke up and panicked when she couldn't find Hyakkimaru. She began searching for him and discovered that Hyakkimaru had secretly returned to the previous hole to defeat the monster, which was still alive. The battle was intense, and even though Hyakkimaru was alone, he eventually defeated the monster and regained his legs. As they were walking back home, they were alarmed by smoke rising from Miyone's house, prompting them to hurry there. Upon arrival, Dororo was shocked to find Miyone's home in flames, and their friends had been killed by enemy clan troops who suspected Miyone of being a spy and wanted to eliminate her. Dororo couldn't stand by and tried to save Miyone, but a soldier grabbed her, thinking she was also a spy and intended to kill her. Just as the soldier was about to attack Dororo, his hand was suddenly severed by Hyakkimaru, who intervened to protect her. Hyakkimaru realized that Miyone was dying, and he was flooded with memories upon hearing her singing in her final moments. Miyone's death pushed Hyakkimaru into a fit of rage, leading him to slaughter the soldiers from the enemy clan. Thankfully, Dororo managed to calm him down, but one of the enemy soldiers who had killed Miyone managed to escape. Dororo then showed Hyakkimaru a package containing rice seeds and explained that Miyone had taken these seeds from the enemy. It was Miyone's dream, as well as the orphans, to grow crops in the fields. Hyakkimaru, upon learning this, hugged Miyone's lifeless body, expressing his frustration and deep sadness. After burying Miyone and the orphans, they continued their journey. A few days later, while on their journey, Dororo tried to cheer up Hyakkimaru, but he remained silent as he couldn't feel emotions. Dororo became annoyed and walked away, but suddenly an object resembling a food box fell from above her head. When she looked up, she saw a spider monster attacking someone, prompting Hyakkimaru to rush to confront it. Unfortunately, the spider monster was very agile, and it ensnared Hyakkimaru with its web attack, managing to escape. However, when the spider monster tried to attack humans again, its body weakened, and it transformed into a woman, losing control. Hyakkimaru and Dororo arrive in a troubled village where many villagers have been kidnapped. Dororo decides to take the lead in catching the kidnapper, hoping for a reward. In another part of the story, a man named Yazero discovers a woman lying on the ground, who happens to be the weakened spider monster from earlier. Not realizing her true identity, Yazero takes her to his house, feeds her, and names her Ohagi. He then leaves to complete his work. Back in the village, Dororo and Hyakkimaru witness villagers gathering to read a sign offering a reward to anyone who catches the kidnapper. Dororo is confident that Hyakkimaru's strength will help them catch the kidnapper, and she explains this to the villagers. In the evening, Yuzuru returned to his house and kindly gave food to Ohadi. He cared for her deeply and was even willing to go without eating to help her recover. Ohadi felt that Yuzuru was different from other humans and couldn't bring herself to harm him. Meanwhile, Dororo, who had been searching for the kidnapper, decided to get some sleep. However, the next day, she heard news of another kidnapping in the village, increasing the reward for catching the kidnapper. Dororo was puzzled because she hadn't heard any commotion the previous night, leading her to believe that the kidnapper might be a human rather than a monster. On the other hand, Yuzuru noticed that Ohadi's condition was getting worse and decided to take her to a doctor, but there was none in the village. So he chose to leave the village in search of medical help. During their journey, Dororo and Hyakkimaru encountered Yuzuru and Ohadi. Dororo explained that Ohadi was a spider monster and warned Yuzuru to keep his distance. Surprisingly, Yuzuru protected Ohadi and confessed to being the kidnapper, not Ohadi. Suddenly, the villagers attacked Yuzuru from behind because they overheard his confession. They decided to capture him, but Ohadi intervened and killed the villagers, drinking their blood to regain her strength. She then rescued Yuzuru, and Hyakkimaru pursued them. As Yuzuru and Ohadi attempted to escape the village, they were ambushed by a barrage of arrows from the angry villagers. Ohadi, infuriated by the attack, transformed into a spider monster and slaughtered the villagers. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru arrived just in time and wounded Ohadi by slashing her leg. This weakened her, and ultimately, both Ohadi and Yuzuru perished while embracing each other. Despite the tragic outcome, Dororo was amazed to learn that there are monsters capable of falling in love with humans. Following this event, they continued their journey to confront the remaining monsters. The scene changed, and a village was suddenly covered in ash from a dark cloud. It was a warning sign that the village was in danger, so the village leader ordered the residents to prepare a bride. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru and Dororo, on their journey, came across a group of people escorting a bride. Out of nowhere, a boy appeared, aiming to shoot the group. He turned out to be the younger brother of the bride, who was being married off to a monster named Negosure to protect their village. He pointed to the cloud covering the village and explained that Negosure was a man-eating monster that would appear and devour the villagers if not appeased with a bride's sacrifice. Dororo decided to help the boy but asked for something in return. The boy promised to give her some caterpillars and a stone. Initially disappointed with the reward, Dororo changed her mind when she discovered the stone was made of gold. The boy introduced himself as Saru. Shortly after, Hyakkimaru, Dororo, and Saru took action to rescue Saru's elder sister. However, when they tried to take her away, she refused, stating it was her own choice because she didn't want anyone else to become the monster's prey. Dororo reassured them, saying that they didn't need to fear the monster because Hyakkimaru would defeat it. Suddenly, a dark cloud covered them, and it swallowed up the guards, spitting them out in a sorry state. Behind the cloud, they discovered a gigantic centipede monster. Dororo instructed Hyakkimaru to attack, but he couldn't see the centipede monster due to the thick fog. Meanwhile, the centipede monster was about to attack Saru, but his elder sister sacrificed herself to save him and was devoured by the creature. The centipede monster then set its sights on Hyakkimaru, but a burst of gas erupted from the ground, causing the monster to fly away. It turns out the centipede monster was afraid of sunlight, which the gas had caused by dispersing the black clouds that covered it. Meanwhile, Saru felt deeply saddened by the loss of his elder sister. He brought Dororo and Hyakkimaru to his home and shared his life story. Saru's parents had died when he was young, and he was forced to survive alone in the forest after being rejected by the villagers. He had endured mistreatment until he met a kind woman, the previous bride, who accepted and cared for him like a sister, even though they were not related by blood. Dororo, upon hearing Saru's story, decided to help him seek revenge by defeating the centipede monster. However, Hyakkimaru, unable to see, could only throw stones. Soon the dark cloud reappeared, much larger this time. Saru and Dororo devised a plan to defeat the centipede monster without Hyakkimaru's assistance. The next day, they led the centipede monster to a flammable area. Once the monster was in position, Saru launched a fire arrow attack, igniting the creature. They hoped that the sunlight would finish off the monster. However, the centipede monster managed to increase its mist, resurrecting itself and preparing to attack Saru and Dororo. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru intervened and threw a rock at the centipede monster. When the monster approached him, he managed to slash it. This was part of his plan, as he used the sound of the rock to locate the centipede monster. However, the monster was not yet defeated. Dororo bravely leaped onto its body and instructed Hyakkimaru to listen to her voice. At first, Dororo had briefly fainted from being hit by a stone, making it challenging for Hyakkimaru to attack the centipede monster. But she regained consciousness and encouraged Hyakkimaru to listen to her voice once more. Eventually, they successfully defeated the centipede monster, and this allowed Hyakkimaru's sense of smell to return. Saru was overjoyed to find that his elder sister had survived. As a token of gratitude, Saru's elder sister gave Hyakkimaru and Dororo a flower before they continued on their journey. After some time, Dororo suddenly fell ill with a fever. Concerned for her well-being, Hyakkimaru sought help but struggled to find assistance. Eventually, he encountered a nun who was willing to take care of Dororo at her home. While receiving treatment, Dororo often had delirious moments where she mentioned her parents' names. The scene then shifts to her past when her parents were still alive. Dororo is the daughter of the village leader who chose to become the leader of a group of bandits after their village was destroyed by the cruel samurai. Her father, Bigoro, and her mother, Uchida, were accompanied by a friend named Itachi and several other followers. Young Dororo was known for her talkative nature and often insisted on accompanying her parents to battles. But Uchida always refused because she was concerned for Dororo's safety, as she was still very young. One day, the samurai army unexpectedly attacked the bandits, but Bigoro and his group managed to emerge victorious. After the battle, they continued their journey in search of other groups of samurai to plunder their treasures. However, a dispute arose between Bigoro and Itachi during their journey. Itachi had been disrespectful towards Uchida, and even suggested that Bigoro and his comrades should join the ruling samurai. This angered Bigoro, who felt betrayed by Itachi's proposal after what the samurai had done to their village. The following day, they attempted to raid a group of resting samurai, as suggested by Itachi. However, when Bigoro ordered the attack, the samurai were already prepared and turned the tables on them. Many of the bandits were wounded, and it turned out that this was all part of Itachi's plan. He had betrayed Bigoro. Fortunately, Itachi spared Bigoro's life and let Dororo and her parents go. After this incident, Dororo and her parents were left in a difficult situation. One day, Bigoro was killed in a samurai attack, leaving Dororo alone with her mother. They were destitute, with no clear destination or source of food, so they wandered aimlessly. Eventually, a man informed them about a place where wealthy people distributed food to the poor. Uchida, hearing this, brought Dororo to that place, only to encounter Itachi, who had risen to a prominent position after joining the samurai who controlled the area. Dororo, filled with anger, attacked him with a rock, but Itachi chose not to retaliate. Suddenly, the chef announced that the food distribution was almost over, causing a chaotic rush as people scrambled to get rations. Fortunately, Uchida managed to secure some leftover food, but lacking a container, she used her hand to carry it despite the scorching heat. She even sacrificed her meal for Dororo's sake. However, as they continued their journey, Uchida collapsed and eventually passed away. Since that day, Dororo made a promise never to give up, even in times of war. In the present, she has fully recovered and continues their journey. In another scene, a male fisherman finds himself in a life-threatening situation as his boat begins to sink. Suddenly, the calm lake waters become turbulent, causing the fisherman to be swept away. This unexpected turmoil is caused by a colossal crab monster that devours the unfortunate fisherman. Elsewhere, Daigo appears concerned about the drought plaguing his village. He decides to visit the Hall of Hell Temple to inspect the condition of the demonic statues there, only to discover that many of them have been destroyed. Shortly afterward, Daigo identifies Hyakkimaru as the culprit behind the destruction of the demon statues, when he notices Hyakkimaru's shadow being cast by one of the statues. Meanwhile, Tahomaru, growing suspicious of his parents' hidden secrets, instructs Higo and Mu to take action. At night, Higo and Mu abducted one of Daigo's male servants. Tahomaru confronted them, demanding to know why his father was searching for a baby boy who disappeared 16 years ago. However, the messenger refused to divulge any information and even injured himself by biting his tongue until it bled. Frustrated, Tahomaru directly approached his father and posed the same question. Daigo, still unwilling to reveal the truth, urged his son not to interfere. This angered Tahomaru, prompting him to seek solace on a nearby hill. Before long, Higo and Mu joined Tahomaru, and he confided in them about how he had never seen his father so serious since childhood. This led him to believe that the missing baby boy must hold immense significance for his father. Not far from their location, Tohomaru spotted a village and ventured there with his men. Upon arrival, the villagers implored him for help in vanquishing a lake-dwelling demon, a crab monster that had recently devoured a fisherman. The villagers explained that the crab monster had been responsible for numerous casualties, and as a prospective village leader, Tohomaru accepted their plea for assistance. Shortly after, Tohomaru and his men quickly made a plan and set sail. Suddenly, their boat came to a halt, and a crab monster emerged. The crab tried to pull their boat underwater, but fortunately, Tohomaru had instructed his men to use ropes tied to trees to anchor their boat. When the monster grabbed one of his men, Tohomaru bravely stepped forward, attacked the crab monster, and wounded it. However, the crab monster was resilient and launched another attack from below, puncturing a hole in their boat. Tohomaru ordered his troops to withdraw, realizing that their boats were now unusable, and it was challenging to combat the crab monsters in the water. The villagers united and devised a plan to construct a dam. The villagers joined forces to carry out Tohomaru's orders. When the lake was drained, he and his troops began to confront the crab monster. Initially, Tohomaru succeeded in pushing the crab monster back, but it eventually destroyed the dam, causing the water to rush back into the lake, and the crab monster overwhelmed them once more. Daigo almost became a prey for the crab monster, but luckily, Hyakkimaru arrived just in time and defeated the crab monster with a single strike. After successfully defeating the creature, Tohomaru expressed his gratitude and gave Hyakkimaru some money. However, Tohomaru found it strange when Dororo mentioned that Hyakkimaru was blind. Daigo and Mu were equally astonished and impressed by the fact that Hyakkimaru, despite his blindness, had managed to defeat the monster. Dororo then inquired with Tohomaru about the location of a very wealthy and prosperous village. Once Tohomaru pointed her in the right direction, she bid them farewell. As Hyakkimaru and Dororo reached the village, a woman was taken aback upon seeing Hyakkimaru's arrival, as if she had a history with him. The woman appeared frightened and referred to him as the demon's child. Afterward, Dororo and Hyakkimaru attended a theater performance depicting Daigo's ability to bring prosperity to his village. To their surprise, they crossed paths with Biwamaru again and engaged in conversation. Biwamaru expressed amazement at the transformation of the land under Daigo's rule, as it was once barren and desolate, but had now become prosperous. As he prepared to leave, Biwamaru sensed something unusual about Hyakkimaru, realizing that Hyakkimaru had taken a human life, which he could discern from the slight red spot in his soul. Meanwhile, Daigo and Mu reported to Daigo about a blind boy named Hyakkimaru who lacked hands, which left Daigo astonished. The scene shifted back to Dororo and Hyakkimaru as they strolled through the village. They overheard two individuals discussing Bunmon, a fortress used by Daigo's army to shield their village from attacks by the Asakura clan. The Asakura clan was a hostile enemy that frequently clashed with Daigo's forces. Due to the high casualty rate at Bunmon, monsters would gather every night to feast on the corpses. When Hyakkimaru and Dororo arrived at Bunmon, they sensed a strong demonic presence. Suddenly, a boy named Sukeruko approached them and warned them to be cautious and not cross the wall. Sukeruko explained that behind the wall was his village. The Asakura clan had burned it down, forcing the villagers to abandon their homes. Sukeruko expressed his desire to reclaim the village and reunite with his family, prompting Dororo to offer her help. Meanwhile, Daigo had learned of Hyakkimaru's location and was determined to kill him. Nue, his wife, tried to intervene, but Daigo was resolute, believing that his actions were necessary for the sake of his village and power. Despite his wife's pleas, Daigo walked away, unaware that Tohomaru had overheard their argument. Tohomaru ventured into the village and encountered a deranged woman who claimed that Hyakkimaru was the child of a demon. Intrigued, Tohomaru questioned the woman, who turned out to be one of the midwives involved in Hyakkimaru's birth. The mad midwife revealed the shocking truth about Daigo, who had sacrificed his son's body to a demon in exchange for power and prosperity for his village. In another place, Hyakkimaru was assisting Sukeruko in his quest to find his family. They were suddenly confronted by numerous evil spirits resembling wolves within the Bunmon area. Despite the challenging situation, Hyakkimaru managed to survive and even defeat some of the evil spirits. However, during the battle, Sukeruko decided to go off on his own in search of his family, causing Dororo to worry and follow him. Regrettably, both Sukeruko and Dororo were captured by troops from the Asakura clan. Meanwhile, as Hyakkimaru continued to fight, he was unexpectedly targeted by arrows from Daigo's army. Initially, Hyakkimaru attempted to retaliate against Daigo, but Daigo insulted him, referring to him as a child of a demon, and questioned why he was still alive. Hyakkimaru fell silent upon hearing these words, leading to another attack. Fortunately, he managed to escape, but Daigo's words weighed heavily on his mind. Meanwhile, Dororo found herself locked up but attempted to escape through a hole in her confinement. Despite being caught at first, she eventually managed to break free. On the other hand, Tohomaru, who continued his search for the missing baby, eventually encountered his mother and questioned her about his father's actions, where he had sacrificed his elder brother for the sake of their village. Nue confirmed this, expressing that she would never forget that tragic event. Learning the truth, Tohomaru felt deeply disappointed and criticized his parents for their lack of compassion. Daigo appeared and defended their actions, emphasizing that everything they did was for the welfare of their village. He explained that, as a leader, he had been willing to sacrifice his own son to ensure the prosperity of his people. Without such a sacrifice, their village would have perished due to a prolonged drought and a devastating outbreak of disease. Shortly after, Hyakkimaru arrived at Daigo's residence, but Daigo received him with harsh words. In contrast, Nue addressed Hyakkimaru as son, despite not having seen him since he was a baby. However, Hyakkimaru had to leave abruptly as he came under attack from arrows. Witnessing this, Tohomaru grew angry with Daigo for attempting to kill his elder brother. Daigo responded with anger of his own, questioning whether Tohomaru wanted their people to suffer the same hardships they had endured in the past, marked by recurring droughts and disease outbreaks. Tohomaru fell silent once more. Daigo then instructed Tohomaru to visit the Hall of Hell Temple and break his promise to the demon if he wished to thwart Daigo's plans. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Hyakkimaru continued to contemplate his parents. Suddenly, Dororo urgently informed Hyakkimaru that he needed to rescue Sukeruko and the other prisoners, who were in danger of being killed by the Asakura clan. On another front, a group of Daigo's warriors gathered and prepared for battle. Meanwhile, Tohomaru found himself torn between the choice of eliminating his elder brother or confronting his own father. Ultimately, he decided to defy his father's orders and proceeded to the Hall of Hell. However, upon his arrival, he was confronted by hostile demons. Elsewhere, just as the Asakura clan was about to execute Sukeruko and the other prisoners, Daigo's forces arrived, sparking a fierce battle between the two groups. Soon after, the malevolent spirit dwelling within Bunmon manifested and aided Daigo's faction in defeating the Asakura clan. Unexpectedly, Hyakkimaru made his appearance, leading to a reunion with his father. To Hyakkimaru's shock, he spotted the soldier who had killed Miyane earlier, causing his emotions to spiral out of control. As Dororo attempted to calm Hyakkimaru, Tohomaru suddenly emerged, revealing himself as Hyakkimaru's younger brother. At first, Dororo felt happy because Hyakkimaru had found his family. However, Tohomaru chose to align with Daigo's goal of village prosperity and decided to kill Hyakkimaru, leading to a fierce battle between the two brothers. As Dororo attempted to rescue Sukeruko, the Bunmon demon reappeared and threatened to devour Sukeruko. She screamed for Hyakkimaru's help, prompting him to rush to her aid and inflict an injury on Tohomaru's eye with his sword. As the battle neared its end, Nue suddenly arrived and offered her apologies to Hyakkimaru for her past misdeeds. She sought to atone for her sins and even went as far as to stab herself to share in Hyakkimaru's suffering. Simultaneously, the statue held by Nue radiated a brilliant light, mirroring Bunmon's fortress in the background, eventually causing the fortress to crumble, forcing Daigo's forces to retreat. Following these events, Dororo attempted to persuade Sukeruko to leave, assuming that he no longer had a family. However, Sukeruko's family emerged from behind the fortress, and he couldn't accept the invitation. In the end, Hyakkimaru and Dororo resumed their journey together. Hyakkimaru's attitude had shifted after reuniting with his parents, and he often ignored Dororo as he was driven by the ambition to regain his body and seek revenge against his father. Dororo suggested he visit a hot spring to calm his mind, but he declined. In a last resort, Dororo fibbed by claiming there was a demon in the hot spring to convince him to go. The story shifts to Nue, who had earlier wounded herself, and her condition is deteriorating. Daigo is concerned that if all the demon statues in the Hall of Hell Temple have been destroyed, His village may one day return to its previous state. In a different location, a woman takes a man into a cave hidden behind a waterfall. She places the man on a rock and injures his face, seemingly searching for the right face to match a stone statue within the waterfall. The scene returns to Dororo and Hyakkimaru, who is currently resting in a house. While Dororo is out collecting firewood in the forest, she accidentally strays too far and comes across the aforementioned stone statue. Before long, the woman appears, and her appearance bears a resemblance to Dororo's mother. However, Dororo is concerned that the woman might be a demon, so she brings her to meet Hyakkimaru for confirmation. Hyakkimaru, relying on his unique vision, cannot discern whether the woman is a demon or a human. He only sees a mostly white figure with a few black spots on the woman. Eventually, the woman introduces herself as Ukaka, revealing that Dororo and Hyakkimaru have been staying in her house. At night, Dororo, feeling curious, asked Ukaka about the statue without a face she had encountered in the forest. Ukaka was initially surprised by the question, but she went on to explain that there was once a skilled female Buddhist sculptor who came to the area. This sculptor discovered a weathered rock that resembled Fudo, a wise but fearsome god. Initially, the sculptor was renowned for creating sculptures of friendly Buddha faces. However, due to the ongoing war, people began to request a statue with a more intimidating appearance. She refused to craft a frightening face, causing people to forget about her. Nevertheless, she remained determined to earn recognition once more. Her goal was to create a large rock sculpture resembling Fudo. Initially, her progress was smooth as she worked on the hands, body, and legs of the statue. Yet, when she attempted to sculpt the face, she encountered difficulties because she wanted to create a unique face never seen before. Every time she attempted it, the face resembled ones she had seen previously. As time passed, she continued to struggle with the statue's face, ultimately growing old and passing away with regrets. After dinner, Dororo, feeling a connection with Ukaka, asked if she would be willing to be called mother by Dororo. Graciously, Ukaka accepted, and Dororo finally embraced her as a mother figure. As Dororo was drifting off to sleep on Ukaka's lap, she continued her story. After the sculptor had passed away, the statue became a dwelling for a demon. This demon aimed to finish the sculptor's work and brought her back to life, instructing her to find a human to mend their faces. Surprisingly, the sculptor was none other than Ukaka herself, and she possessed the ability to change her appearance and voice to mimic someone known to her victim. While Ukaka didn't show interest in Dororo's youthful face, it turned out she had been keen on Hyakkimaru's face all along. She had been poisoning them through the food she provided. Ukaka then took Hyakkimaru to the waterfall for a sacrificial ritual. Fortunately, Dororo caught on to this plan and hurried after them. Upon arriving, she attempted to confront Ukaka, but struggled to do so. Before long, Hyakkimaru regained consciousness and tried to attack Ukaka, realizing that the statue was the true demon. He attempted to destroy the statue, but was thrown into the water when it countered his attack. While submerged in the water, Hyakkimaru saw numerous people who had been sacrificed by Ukaka. When he resurfaced at the top of the waterfall, she had taken on the appearance of Hyakkimaru's mother in an attempt to deceive him. Regrettably, Ukaka's plan failed as Hyakkimaru had never seen his mother's face. However, she managed to capture him, intending to use his appearance to complete her own. Meanwhile, Dororo restrained Ukaka and offered some advice, telling her that she didn't need a perfect face as long as she had a nose, mouth, and eyes. Upon hearing Dororo's words, Ukaka fell silent, but suddenly the statue harmed her, causing her to disintegrate into dust and perish. However, Hyakkimaru attacked the statue's face, causing the demon within to vanish. Following this event, Dororo and Hyakkimaru continued their journey to the hot springs. Along the way, they encountered Biwamaru and a group of boys once more. This annoyed Dororo, but the boys accidentally saw her back, revealing an image resembling a map. They soon realized that the image only appeared when Dororo was exposed to hot water. The story then revisited Dororo's past, where her father had foreseen his own death. He wanted to inform his wife about a map that revealed the treasures they had taken from the samurai. However, her mother was afraid she might divulge the secret, so she suggested drawing half of the map on her back and the other half on Dororo's back. This way, neither of them could see the complete map. In the present, Dororo doesn't really care about the treasure anymore because her main goal is to help Hyakkimaru regain his body. However, Biwamaru tells her that the map on her body is quite significant. He even mentions that the map has the power to influence people and change the world. This leaves Dororo feeling confused. While Dororo and Hyakkimaru continue on their journey, they suddenly hear a woman's voice, urging them to take care of someone. Shortly after, a female spirit appears, asking them to look after her baby, and then she disappears. Hyakkimaru doesn't react much because he senses that the woman's spirit is not a demon. As they proceed with their journey, Dororo and Hyakkimaru come across a dilapidated temple. While exploring the place, the spirit of the woman from earlier guides Hyakkimaru to something beneath the temple. He discovers a pool of liquid, which turns out to be kerosene. Dororo suspects that the place was destroyed by fire. Around the same time, the baby mentioned by the female spirit reappears, but someone else arrives, and the baby vanishes once more. This newcomer is a man named Sabame, the village leader, and he appears to be quite suspicious. Hyakkimaru noticed a red spot in Sabame's soul aura, but he wasn't sure if Sabame was a demon or not. Afterward, Sabame invited them to his house for dinner and offered them a place to stay the night. While they were eating, Dororo asked Sabame about the temple they had seen burning, but everyone fell silent as soon as she mentioned it. Sabame explained that there used to be a nun at the temple who took in orphan children. However, instead of treating them kindly, she mistreated and abused them. The orphans were subjected to hard work and torture, and when the nun needed money, she would even sell them. Tragically, the temple was struck by lightning, causing a fire that burned the nun and the orphans. Upon hearing this story, Hyakkimaru and Dororo realized that the female spirit they had encountered earlier was the nun. However, Dororo couldn't understand why there was evidence of an oil spill at the temple if it was destroyed by lightning. Later, as they were sleeping, a massive caterpillar suddenly entered their room. Hyakkimaru woke up just in time to fend it off, even managing to wound it. However, a giant moth appeared and carried the injured caterpillar away. The following day, Dororo walked around the village and noticed that everyone was friendly and kind to her. An old lady even invited her to eat dango cakes with her and her granddaughter. However, when Dororo asked the old lady about the burnt temple, something strange happened. The old lady suddenly acted oddly and walked away. Even the people who had been friendly now gave her strange and sinister looks. On the other hand, Hyakkimaru, who had suspicions about Sabame, decided to follow him. Unfortunately, he was caught by Sabame while on a hill. Meanwhile, Dororo stumbled upon a temple in the forest and tried to enter. It turned out to be a storage place for rice used by the villagers. She then found a basement in the temple, but as she attempted to enter, some people pushed her and locked her inside. Meanwhile, Sabame continued to share the history of his village with Hyakkimaru. In ancient times, his village resembled a living hell. The villagers suffered from hunger, had their belongings stolen, and couldn't tend to their crops due to the numerous wild animals that ravaged their fields. One day, Sabame encountered Ayakashi, a demon who offered to bring prosperity to his village. However, Ayakashi demanded a human soul as a sacrifice in return. Without much thought, Sabame agreed to these conditions to save his village. Ever since that day, life in the village became prosperous. Meanwhile, Dororo, trapped in the basement, was suddenly attacked by a group of caterpillars. Fortunately, when she was in a dire situation, the spirit of the previous giant baby came to her aid. It turned out that the baby's spirit was that of the orphans who had been killed in the earlier temple. These spirits revealed to Dororo that it wasn't lightning that had killed them, but rather Sabame and the other villagers who had sacrificed them to Ayakashi. With the help of these spirits, Dororo managed to escape from that place. While Hyakkimaru was on the verge of confronting Sabame, he was attacked by several moths. Although initially overwhelmed and pressured, Hyakkimaru eventually defeated the moths. As a consequence of Hyakkimaru's earlier attack, one of the moths became unstable, leading to the entire village, including the rice storage, going up in flames, leaving Sabame in shock. Dororo then met up with Hyakkimaru to share everything she had learned. She instructed him to head to the lake where the demon was hiding. As he reached the lake, the moth demon appeared, prompting Hyakkimaru to attack. He managed to defeat the demon without much trouble. After defeating the moth demon, Hyakkimaru suddenly felt pain because his backbones had started to return. Simultaneously, one of the demon statues in the Hall of Hell Temple was destroyed. Seeing the burning village houses initially evoked sympathy from Dororo. However, Hyakkimaru had a different perspective. He was solely focused on killing all the demons to regain his body and seek revenge. This disappointed Dororo greatly, making her believe that Hyakkimaru was becoming like the demons themselves. Consequently, she decided to part ways with him. While on their journey, Itachi and his troops suddenly appeared. Their intention was to find half of a treasure map that Dororo supposedly carried within her body. She admitted she didn't have the map and even showed her bare back, explaining that the map would only appear when exposed to hot water. However, Itachi remained skeptical and still took her with them. In the midst of the forest, Itachi revealed that he had known about the map for a long time and had even desecrated her mother's grave. Dororo was infuriated by this revelation, but was unable to take any action against him. The following day, Itachi took Dororo to where the treasure was supposed to be hidden. He believed that only Dororo knew the treasure's exact location. They searched for a boat to reach the destination but found a village that seemed to have been plundered, along with damaged boats. Soon, a man approached and offered them a boat. Dororo tried to warn Itachi about the man, finding him suspicious. However, Itachi ignored her advice and accepted the offer. As they crossed the waters, they were shocked to discover two sharks pulling their boat. The man claimed the sharks were his family. This man was even willing to sacrifice his own hand to feed his sharks. He explained that since he had offered his hands, the sharks no longer desired anything else and craved only human flesh. Consequently, he killed the entire village to provide for his sharks. It became clear that he had taken them with the intention of using them as food. He commanded his sharks to attack, leading to the death of half of Itachi's troops. The man departed, leaving one of his sharks to watch over Itachi, Dororo, and the remaining soldiers. Itachi felt despair, but Dororo encouraged him to stay strong. She explained that complaining only made them weaker. She had grown up alone and had never complained, even when facing near-death experiences. Dororo then jumped into the water, intending to use herself as bait. Meanwhile, Itachi's troops tried to kill the shark when it resurfaced. Eventually, they succeeded in defeating the shark. Shortly after, the man returned and was surprised to find one of the sharks dead. Itachi and his troops then launched a fierce attack on the man, leaving him badly beaten. Itachi insisted that Dororo hand over her map once again. To his surprise, he discovered that Dororo was a girl when he stripped her of her clothes. Soon, they noticed the map on Dororo's back, and Itachi copied it before leaving her behind. Meanwhile, the man, though still alive, sought revenge for his dead shark. The scene shifts to Juki, who is going about his work. An old man approaches him and urges him to stop his seemingly futile efforts. Suddenly, a demon appears, but instead of attacking Juki, it goes after the old man. Unexpectedly, Hyakkimaru arrives and defeats the demon. This encounter surprises and delights Jukai, who had been waiting to meet Hyakkimaru for a long time. He takes Hyakkimaru to his cave dwelling, where he is astonished to learn that Hyakkimaru can speak and hear. Hyakkimaru shares with Juki the story of the person who sacrificed his body, Daigo, the leader of Kaga village, and his father. Juki is deeply shocked and feels responsible for releasing Hyakkimaru into a world of suffering. When Hyakkimaru asks Juki for prosthetic legs, Juki pretends to comply but secretly destroys the prosthetic legs to prevent Hyakkimaru from continuing to fight. He is aware that Hyakkimaru has not only killed demons but also some humans. During their conversation, the ground above them suddenly collapses, sealing the cave entrance. The scene shifts, and we see Hyakkimaru, whose personality has undergone a significant change since his defeat by Hyakkimaru in their previous battle. Hyakkimaru, once known for his kindness, now seems constantly angry. Even though his mother's health had improved, Hyakkimaru avoids visiting her and instead prioritizes investigating reports of a demon in one of the villagers' houses. He arrives at the location quickly. Upon entering the house with his men, they encounter a rat demon, which they promptly kill and burn the house. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru continues to dig his way out of the cave while receiving advice from Juki. Juki is curious about Hyakkimaru's motivations for hunting demons, to which Hyakkimaru responds that he solely desires to reclaim his own body. Moments later, Hyakkimaru successfully escapes from the cave, only to be confronted by the same group of demons from before. These demons emerge from a tree in front of the cave. Hyakkimaru defeats them and destroys the heart of the tree. Following this, Juki decides to part ways with Hyakkimaru, recalling Hyakkimaru's mention of someone who disappeared with him and needs to be found. Juki believes that this person, who has been by Hyakkimaru's side, is better suited to protect and guide him, and that person is none other than Dororo. Thus, Hyakkimaru embarks on a journey to find Dororo. On the other hand, after defeating the rat demon, Hyakkimaru receives orders from his father to kill Hyakkimaru, who is believed to be on an island. While on the island, they encounter a man who has a close bond with sharks. This man is furious because Itachi and his soldiers killed one of his pet sharks named Saburomaru. The man commands his surviving shark, Jiromaru, to seek revenge for Saboromaru's death. Upon receiving his master's orders, Jiromaru's demeanor changes, and he swims to the mainland to attack Itachi's soldiers. He transforms into a demon and threatens Dororo. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru arrives just in time to slay the demon. After defeating the demon, Hyakkimaru apologizes to Dororo for leaving her and expresses his intention to reunite with her. However, he suddenly experiences pain as one of his legs regenerates. Unfortunately, the man who owned the shark remains alive, but Hyakkimaru and Dororo decide to leave him behind as they continue their quest to find Itachi. Meanwhile, Itachi, who has located the treasure, is caught off guard by several traps that claim the lives of several of his men. Nearby, Hyakkimaru and Dororo are surprised by the arrival of multiple ships headed to the island. These ships belong to Tohomaru's group, who are determined to track down Hyakkimaru. Upon arriving on the island, Tohomaru ordered his men to eliminate anyone they encountered. Hearing this, Dororo quickly sought a hiding place, while some of Itachi's group were unfortunate and had to be killed because they were discovered by Tohomaru's soldiers. Unexpectedly, Dororo crossed paths with Itachi while hiding, and they joined forces to distract Tohomaru's troops, preventing them from approaching the treasure they sought. They were concerned that if Tohomaru's forces discovered the treasure, it would be taken away. After successfully executing their plan, they planned to sneak away discreetly. However, they were eventually spotted by Tohomaru's troops. This led to another battle between Hyakkimaru and Tohomaru, while Dororo was taken away to safety by Itachi. Initially, Hyakkimaru had the upper hand in the fight, but Higo and Mu arrived to support Tohomaru and managed to gain the upper hand, even breaking Hyakkimaru's sword and nearly defeating him. Meanwhile, despite Itachi's initial intention to steal Dororo's treasure, he treated her with kindness and had no intention of killing her. He held respect for her father, who had been his former leader. Unfortunately, while fleeing, Itachi was determined to return for the treasure, despite Dororo's warnings. His stubbornness led to him being wounded by several arrows. Witnessing this, Dororo panicked and accidentally dropped the statues containing the treasure, deciding to abandon them entirely. When Dororo attempted to rescue Itachi, the man who owned the shark arrived on a hill holding a torch and set off an explosion. This forced Tohomaru, who was in the midst of battling Hyakkimaru, to retreat. Dororo, in the chaos, accidentally stumbled upon her father's belongings due to the explosion. Tragically, Itachi lost his life while protecting Dororo from the explosion. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru, who survived the blast, rushed to find Dororo and eventually located her inside a cave where her father's treasure was stored. Dororo recalled Biwamaru's earlier words about how her treasure could impact people and change the world. However, unsure of the meaning behind these words, she decided to take some of her treasures with her for their journey. After traveling for some time, Hyakkimaru and Dororo arrived at a village and inquired about a swordsmith named Monetsuna. Hyakkimaru's sword had been damaged during his battle with Tohomaru. Strangely, a man in the village described Monetsuna as a poor swordsmith with an ugly daughter. However, when Dororo approached Monetsuna's house, they found that the man's description was completely different from reality. Monetsuna's daughter, Okawa, was exceptionally beautiful. Nonetheless, Hyakkimaru displayed unusual behavior that made Okawa uncomfortable. Okawa informed her father about the arrival of Dororo and Hyakkimaru. Monetsuna invited them to a temple for the purification and blessing of Hyakkimaru's sword. Unexpectedly, while they were in the midst of their prayers, a demon suddenly materialized and cast a spell on Hyakkimaru. After being affected by the demon's magic, Hyakkimaru's behavior took a complete turn. He started saying things that were the opposite of what he used to say. Hyakkimaru told Dororo that he no longer wanted to be with her and had given up on searching for his body. He even agreed to have Okawa accompany him, which greatly annoyed Dororo. Strangely, Dororo's words and actions also changed. Despite her annoyance, she went along with everything Hyakkimaru and Okawa said. She eventually left them, feeling perplexed by the situation. The following day, to everyone's surprise, Okawa expressed her desire to marry Hyakkimaru and invited people to attend their wedding. Dororo was both shocked and angry, yet she reluctantly gave her blessing to the union, making Okawa very happy. Dororo, not understanding what was happening, distanced herself from them and went to speak with Monetsuna. During her conversation with Monetsuna, Dororo shared her frustration about the situation. She noticed something strange happening around her. When she spoke with Monetsuna, who was far from the shrine, she spoke her mind. However, when she was near Okawa's house, which was close to the shrine, her words contradicted her true feelings. Dororo decided to investigate the temple to check for any demons, and her suspicions proved correct. She spotted a demon resting on top of the temple and managed to make it fall by throwing a rock at it. Shortly after, Hyakkimaru and Okawa arrived at the temple, and Hyakkimaru intended to confront the demon. However, he was struck by the demon's magic, causing it to target Dororo. Fortunately, Monatsume intervened and defeated the demon, forcing it to retreat. Okawa eventually realized that the strange occurrences were the result of a demon's influence. She decided to call off her wedding with Hyakkimaru. During this time, another young man proposed to Okawa, and she accepted, leading to their wedding taking place. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru, armed with his new sword, continued on his journey. Long story short, Dororo felt joy while passing through a forest with vibrant red autumn trees. As they enjoyed some fruit, Dororo explained the different seasons of the world: summer, autumn, spring, and winter. She expressed her admiration for autumn, hoping that one day Hyakkimaru would experience all these seasons. Before long, a man named Sabota approached them, claiming to be a demon hunter like Hyakkimaru. However, his motive was revenge for his mother's death at the hands of a demon, unlike Hyakkimaru, who sought to regain his body. Dororo and Hyakkimaru grew suspicious of Sabota's behavior. He led them to the location of the demon, and eventually the demon appeared. Dororo was astonished to see that the demon had a body resembling various animals, particularly a tiger. Hyakkimaru engaged in a battle against the tiger-like demon. However, during the fight, Sabota turned on Hyakkimaru, revealing that his plan was to manipulate the tiger demon into killing both Hyakkimaru and Dororo. Sabota explained that witnessing the tiger demon's victims helped fill the emptiness in his heart. Shortly after, the tiger demon resumed its attack on Hyakkimaru, causing them both to plummet. Now, let's shift to Sabota's backstory. In the past, he was a kind-hearted person who deeply loved his mother. He would carry her every day to help her get around. Tragically, one day, a tiger demon attacked and devoured his mother, leaving Sabota heartbroken. To make matters worse, the people in his village started insulting him and calling him an unsuccessful samurai because he couldn't protect his mother. One day, some men from the village approached Sabota, asking him to avenge his mother's death. Instead, those men were killed and eaten by the tiger demon. From that moment on, Sabota could only find solace in witnessing the tiger demon's victims. Now, back to the present, Hyakkimaru and Dororo are saved by Biwamaru, who appears out of nowhere. Following this rescue, Hyakkimaru heads to confront the tiger demon and manages to defeat it, despite Sabota teaming up with the demon. Unfortunately, defeating the tiger demon doesn't result in any of Hyakkimaru's body parts returning, leaving him disappointed. Ultimately, Hyakkimaru realizes that some of his body parts are inside Daigo's body, prompting him to set off for Daigo's location to reclaim his missing body parts. Now, let's talk about a village in Daigo's land. This village was in trouble. A strange disease was spreading, and their crops weren't growing well due to a lack of rain. At the same time, Hyakkimaru was on his way to meet Daigo, but he ran into some spies from the Asakura clan and one of Daigo's followers. Meanwhile, Daigo had just received news about a deadly disease in one of the villages he ruled over. Surprisingly, he made a harsh decision. He ordered his men to burn down the infected village to prevent the disease from spreading. He even ordered those who were sick to be killed and the healthy ones to join the war effort. Additionally, they were instructed to take some horses for the war. Shortly after, Daigo's men, who had crossed paths with Hyakkimaru, reported his presence in the territory. Upon hearing this, Tohomaru asked his father for permission to take on the task of defeating Hyakkimaru. Tohomaru was confident that, with the help of his friends, they could defeat him. Daigo agreed, but he secretly had some men keep an eye on Tohomaru. In another place, Dororo asked Hyakkimaru what he would do if he met his parents. Hyakkimaru's answer shocked and saddened Dororo. He said he would kill his parents if they tried to stop him. Meanwhile, Tohomaru, Higo, and Mu were in a hurry to leave. But Mu was hiding an illness from Tohomaru because he didn't want to disappoint him. Later that evening, Mu finally confided in Tohomaru about their past. They had been victims of war and were imprisoned. Daigo then made them Tohomaru's training partners, and they had been in battles together ever since. The next day, troops from Daigo's side were heading to war. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru and Dororo encountered Tohomaru, Higo, and Mu on their journey. This led to a fight, with Hyakkimaru managing to hold his own against the three of them. He even injured Miu and Higo and pushed back Tohomaru. Unfortunately, during the fight, Daigo's men attacked Hyakkimaru and even used a horse with a bomb to push him into a ravine. They captured Dororo as a hostage in case Hyakkimaru survived and tried to reach Daigo. At the bottom of the ravine, injured Hyakkimaru encountered demons that revived dead horses. With their help, he used one of the demon horses to rescue Dororo. The story shifts to Juki, who is waiting for the war to end so he can continue his work. He sees Dororo brought by some of Daigo's troops, but doesn't realize that Dororo is always with Hyakkimaru. Meanwhile, Tohomaru visits Higo and Miu and discovers that Miu is sick. Tohomaru wants to go into Miu's room, but Miu refuses and tells Tohomaru to stay away. Miu explains that due to his injuries and illness, he may no longer be able to fight alongside Tohomaru. He asks Higo to protect Tohomaru in his absence. Tohomaru, feeling sad, orders his men to kill Hyakkimaru. On the other hand, Dororo is held captive by Daigo's troops and attempts to escape. Unexpectedly, Nue arrives and sets her free. Nue thanks Dororo for accompanying Hyakkimaru all this time. However, when Dororo tries to leave, Nue returns and wants to join her. Nue does this in hopes of meeting Hyakkimaru again and seeking forgiveness for her past actions. She's even willing to be killed by him if he cannot forgive her. As they travel on a boat, the river current becomes swift and challenging to control. Unfortunately, they encounter a wooden barrier, causing them to fall. In another place, Mu had left his room, and Higo and Tohomaru were searching for him. Meanwhile, Dororo woke up and found herself in the same village that had been burned down by Daigo's men due to an epidemic. She had been rescued by Biwamaru, who was also in the village. Dororo started looking for Nue, who was helping some villagers. While some villagers were happy with Nue's assistance, others were angry because her husband had burned their village and killed those who were sick. At the village border, Hyakkimaru, riding the demon horse, entered Daigo's territory and attacked anyone in his way. Later, Dororo and Nue heard news about Daigo's troops heading to the village and a demon attacking. They suspected it might be Hyakkimaru, and their suspicions were confirmed when they saw him and his demon horse angrily attacking Daigo's troops. On the other hand, Mu had gone to the Hall of Hell Temple, intending to offer his body to the demons in exchange for protecting the village with his soul. Shortly after, Tohomaru and Higo arrived to witness Mu's demonic contract. However, after Mu made the pact, nothing happened because the agreement could only be fulfilled with Hyakkimaru's body. Suddenly, lightning struck the area, causing something unusual to occur. Meanwhile, after Hyakkimaru had defeated Daigo's troops, he set out to find Dororo. But he was surprised to encounter Tohomaru and his troops, who now possessed parts of Hyakkimaru's body. Tohomaru had 3 eyes, and these body parts were given to them by a demon in the Hall of Hell. They were ordered to kill Hyakkimaru to fulfill their agreement. Aware of this, Hyakkimaru was furious and determined to reclaim his body. Another battle ensued between him and Tohomaru. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru managed to defeat Tohomaru once again, repeatedly demanding the return of his body. Before long, Hyakkimaru's demon horse killed Miu and Higo, resulting in the return of his hands. However, Tohomaru, grieving the loss of his 2 comrades, sought to avenge them by trying to kill Hyakkimaru. Mid-fight, Hyakkimaru decided to flee to prevent his mother and Dororo from witnessing the battle. Their confrontation continued on the riverbank, where Hyakkimaru gained the upper hand. Eventually, Tohomaru chose to retreat and return to the palace. Meanwhile, following Hyakkimaru's recent battle, Dororo and some villagers came to the realization that they shouldn't rely on the samurai anymore. Depending on the samurai would mean giving them control over their lives. They made a decision to stand up and survive on their own strength without depending on others. The scene shifts back to Tohomaru, who has just reached the palace. He orders everyone to leave so that he can have a free fight. Daigo is busy with his battle against the Asakura clan troops and cannot send reinforcements for Tohomaru. After some waiting, Hyakkimaru and Tohomaru finally engage in battle once more. Dororo, Nue, Biwamaru, and Juki continue their journey to the palace to intervene in their fight. The battle between Hyakkimaru and Tohomaru is intense, even leading to a fire in the palace. As time passes, Hyakkimaru gains control over his emotions and decides not to kill Tohomaru, and Tohomaru realizes that he cannot defeat Hyakkimaru. However, the last demonic statue in the Hall of Hell reacts, causing Tohomaru to nearly lose control. Fortunately, he manages to remove his 2 extra eyes, which had suddenly appeared underground. Before the mysterious object could fully appear, Hyakkimaru quickly stabbed it, causing his eyeballs to return instantly, and the object vanished. After the battle concluded, Nue and Juki arrived to rescue him. Prior to that, Nue embraced Hyakkimaru, and Juki gave him a statue of the goddess of protection, similar to the one Nue had worshipped before. For the very first time, Hyakkimaru could see and recognize his mother's face. Dororo came to assist him in leaving the palace. Hyakkimaru was astonished by the world he saw for the first time and complimented Dororo's face, which he found beautiful. Meanwhile, Nue, Jukai, and Tohomaru were still inside the palace, even as it crumbled around them. It remains uncertain whether they are alive or dead. News of this reached Daigo, but he chose to ignore it and continued with his military campaign. Simultaneously, the last demon statue in the Hall of Hell Temple was destroyed. This resulted in Daigo losing a significant number of his troops and facing difficulties in fending off the Asakura clan troops that were attacking. In another place, Dororo collected her father's savings to help the villagers. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru, who still had unresolved matters with Daigo, finally encountered him at the Hall of Hell Temple. Initially, he considered killing Daigo, but he ultimately decided against it because he realized that Daigo wasn't a demon, and he had already regained what was rightfully his. The anime concludes with Hyakkimaru advising Daigo not to succumb to greed and become a demon. Following this, Hyakkimaru resumes his journey alongside Dororo. So the moral of the story is, when trading with demons, always read the fine print, or you might find yourself missing a few pieces of the family get-together.